What is grunge and why did it kill glam metal? Next on Retro Serial. Hey everyone, this is ENC. I'm glad you could be joining me for today's program. On today's program, we have Chris from Redbeard Video. Now, if you have not checked out his page, you need to check out his YouTube page. It is absolutely amazing. He's got great insight into music and bands and songs and albums and everything. A lot of stuff we talk about here, he talks about the same stuff over there. And it's not just about music. He also does stuff on, well, all kinds of entertainment. But he's been generous enough to offer Retro Serial $1 on our Buy Me a Coffee page for every one of you who goes over there and subscribes and clicks on a video and leaves in the comment that ENC sent you or Retro Serial sent you. He was kind enough to make that offer. So it's a win-win for everybody. It's a win for you because you're going to get great content over there on his channel. It's a win for us because obviously every dollar counts here to help us grow this program. And it's a win for him because his subscriber base will just grow as well. So go over there and check that out. And on today's program, we are going to be talking about a definition of grunge music and why it's hard to define, the origins of glam metal, how glam metal differs from other kinds of metal, and then ultimately why it was that grunge and other forms kind of killed glam metal, and even some of the bands that got swept under the carpet along that were metal bands, but because they were associated in any way with glam rock also got swept under the carpet, all on today's show. But before we get to that show, please do me the favor of liking this video and subscribing. Those two things, they really mean a lot. They're small steps for you, but they mean a lot to us on the program here. If you want to go a couple extra steps, you're always invited to share this on your favorite social media. Get the word out about the great content you're receiving here on this channel and help us grow our subscriber base. If you want to know when these videos out, hit the bell notification as always. And what else can you do? Oh yeah, there's the Buy Me a Coffee page where you can click the link below to the Buy Me a Coffee page and donate and part with some of your hard-earned cash. Only if you believe in what we're doing here and only if you have the ability to do so. All those things would be appreciated. Also, was there anything else I want to say? Yes, there was. Now listen. Before we get to the program today, if you're out there and you have a YouTube channel or you have a podcast, and it doesn't necessarily have to be about growing up Generation X, but it's about arts and entertainment, but you want to talk Generation X, or you want me on your program, I'm always willing to have you on the show. Please contact me on the YouTube page. You can see in my contact information that I have my email there. Please contact me. I would love to either have you on my program or be on your program, and we can talk about music, we can talk about movies, we can talk about TV, we can talk about all kinds of stuff. I'm just looking for great people to have conversations with and have great content to produce here on the show. So with all of that, oh, and by the way, the Chris's page will be left in the comment section below as well. So, or not the comment section, but the description box below. So Redbeard Video will be down there so you can click on them and subscribe. And even if you never tell him that you sent me, it's totally worth subscribing. He has a great channel and he has really got a very good insight into music, among other things. All right, so with all that said, let's get to the interview. One final word of warning prior to getting to this video and this interview, and that is that there is a considerable amount of cursing in this show, which is a little bit unusual, but Chris was nice enough to be on the show, and he was actually nice enough to ask me. He said, hey, can we curse on the program? And I wasn't going to edit him as far as saying, yeah, you know, this isn't TV, this is YouTube, and this is a podcast. So I'm like, if you want to curse, you go right ahead. Thank you for being on the show. And that was really all I was concerned about, is him being able to speak freely as he wants to speak, and the fact that I was just overwhelmed of his generosity of being on the show. But I only say it here for you so that if you're listening to this and there are children in the car, or you're watching this and there are children around and you don't want them to be exposed to that, this is just a heads up warning. Now, with that said, let's really get to the video. Chris from Red Beard Video. I stumbled upon his channel a little while ago and I was like, man, this guy has a heart for music. He knows his stuff. He talks about the same kind of things that I talk about, and I wanted to interview him, and he was gracious enough to get right back to me and say, hey, yeah, I'd love to talk to you about music. And it was really difficult to kind of hone down what we wanted to talk about. But I'll let everybody know what we're going to talk about. And then I'm going to hand it over to you, Chris, to tell us a little bit about your channel. And then we're going to jump into the subject matter. But today is April 5th. And on April 5th in 1994, we lost a legend, my favorite recording artist of all time, and that is Kurt Cobain. And then also in 2002.
Check it out right there. See that? I have it right behind me, man. Nirvana concert poster, Roseland, July 23rd, 1993, New York City. Boom.
Wow.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And in 2002, we also lost Lane Staley on the same day on April 5th.
Geez. One of my favorite bands right there.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I did a little live video earlier talking about was Nirvana actually a grunge band? But I'll let people listen to that and decide for themselves whether
I actually have a take on that if you'd want to talk about it.
We can talk about that for this. I was going to talk in light of this, like what killed metal, or what killed hair metal, I should say,
right,
in light of Kurt Cobain's passing. But first tell us a little bit about your channel, what your subjects are. I've seen a few videos already, which were fantastic, but the one I really liked was mislabeled hair bands. I agreed with like 98% of what you said. I had a little disagreement on the Skid Row thing, but I did like what you had to say overall. And I loved your stuff you said on Queensryche. I was waiting for you to say something on Queensryche. I was like, Queensryche's got to be on this list. It's got to be on this list. And it was number one. That was my number one pick too. But I'm blathering on at the mouth, Chris. Tell us about your channel and we'll get into it.
First off, I'm an egomaniac, so gushing about my channel is fine by me.
Okay.
So Redbeard Videos is basically an amalgam of everything that goes on in this giant bean that you see before you under this huge red beard. Pretty much since I was a teenager, or even before then, but definitely since I was a teenager, me and my friends would make lists. Top fives, top tens, what's the top five, openers to an album or closers to an album, but we wouldn't talk just about music. It would be movies and sports and just whatever. So you're going to find that, I know that it seems like I have a heart for music, and I do. Music is my first passion, but like the video that's coming out tonight as we speak, it's uploading to YouTube as I speak to you, will be my top 5 all-time baseball movies. So in light of opening day, just happening this weekend in baseball season for those sports fans out there. So, and it's something that I'm passionate about. That's part of my childhood, but music is definitely the number one thing. And what you'll find on my channel is you'll find, right now there's 3 types of shows. There's the top 5s, or no, a show called the 5s, which is always a countdown of some sort or a list of 5 things. And we've done everything that ranges from 90s metal albums that don't get enough love, because the 90s are the most, possibly the most maligned decade of music in the history of music. For whatever reason, people just take giant heaping. Do you curse on your channel?
You can curse if you'd like. I don't.
Giant heaping shits on the 90s constantly, especially in the metal community. For some reason, the 90s get dumped on constantly. I talk about hair metal a lot because I'm super interested in that. I grew up on it. I'm an 80. I was between the ages of 4 and 14 in the 80s. So that was a very seminal period for me to kind of get myself together. There's stuff about prog rock and prog metal because that's my true passion. That's the lane I drive drive it. That's the lane I drive in the most. I got my sugar on today. Like that's
Uh-huh.
the lane I drive in most is prog. You know, I've been known as Chris the Progtologist all over the world because of my show Progtology 101, which has been on the air since 2007. So in
Awesome.
some way, shape, or form, it's been somewhere. It was on Sirius Satellite Radio. It was internationally known. It was in college stations. It was just, it's been all over, and now it's just on one station once a month, but we can get to that another time. But yeah, that's
Well, I would
the
love for you at some point, if you liked what we're doing here, if you don't hate me by the end of this, which is a distinct possibility, I'll have you back on to talk about prog rock, because there's few people who actually know the subject, and it's one thing I want to cover. But you sound a little bit like my channel. My channel isn't just about music. My channel is Growing Up Generation X, and I talk about movies, music, television shows, all that stuff, and I just rotate through it. It's just the passion of what I grew up on. So all right, we're going to talk about what killed metal. We're going to talk about the origins, not metal, because metal really never died, but glam metal did suffer a death to a degree. But before we do that, you said that you had a take on whether or not Nirvana was a grunge band. And I have kind of a yes and no answer. I already gave my answer earlier, so I'd love to hear what you have to say about the subject.
Well, first and foremost, and this also applies to hair metal, the grunge thing and the hair metal thing, it's a fashion thing more than it is a musical thing. Because if you really look, and more for grunge, it applies more to grunge than it does for hair metal, believe it or not. Because as diverse as hair metal is, I can choose hair metal bands, Poison, Warrant, bands like Queensryche that were labeled hair metal, Saigon Kick was labeled hair metal, White Lion, Rat, Faster Pussycat. All of those bands have literally one thing in common and nothing else. There is very, very little between those 5 bands that I just grabbed out of the clear blue sky that were all labeled hair metal. And you can turn on Sirius Satellite Radio's Hair Nation at any given moment and hear any of those bands. And the only thing that they will have, 2 things. They each have a power ballad of some sort, and they each wore copious amounts of hairspray at some point in their career. And that's it. But like Faster Pussycat is a filthy sleaze metal band, if there's ever been one. They are down to the core, dirty lyrically. Their music is sleaze rock, and that's what they are. Then you got Saigon Kick, which is a borderline King's X-ish, prog rock, prog metal band at times that had the unfortunate circumstance of having a hit. God forbid they make money. So they got labeled a hair metal band because it was during the power ballad era. And then you have Queensryche, which is the most accessible, successful next to Rush prog band there's ever been, probably. Depending on if you think Genesis was a prog band during the 80s, or if Pink Floyd was a prog band. That's a different discussion for a different day. The point that I'm making is that the only thing these guys had in common was their fashion sensibilities. And the same can be said for grunge. Look at the big 4 of grunge: Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, Pearl Jam, Nirvana.
Yep.
Those 4 bands are literally the most different sounding band you'll ever put on a list of anything. Alice in Chains is a borderline prog rock band, prog metal band. They are so deep. They're a mixture of like metal, almost sludgy at times, with a Beatle-esque dissonant. Like if you took Beatles harmonies and then made them dissonant, that's what Alice in Chains is. Okay.
Yeah.
Then you have, and they were bluesy too on top of that. So they were bluesy, sludgy, Beatle-esque, proggy. Like they were just the strangest band ever. Nirvana was punk / metal with a pop sensibility at times.
Yeah.
You had Soundgarden, which was almost like a downright metal band until Super Unknown came out.
Yeah.
And then you have Pearl Jam, which is a rock band.
Yeah.
Pearl Jam is no more or less than a straight rock band. That's what they are.
Yeah.
But yet they all wore, flannels.
Yeah.
They all didn't brush their hair.
Yeah.
And they all had a little bit of like snarl to their voice, and they were angsty.
Yeah.
So that was the thing.
That's like, kind of what defined grunge. I do think though that as I reflect upon those bands, and even lesser known grunge bands such as like Tad or Screaming Trees or Mudhoney and stuff. I do think that they had more in common with each other, especially the big four. The three of the big four had a little bit more in common than, I would say, the one that stood out the most out of those four is Nirvana. They just had more pop sound to them than the others. In my opinion, he did not experiment with the Jarl, although they all had the Jarl going for them. He had a little bit of a higher voice. And I just thought his music was more influenced by punk than the others were.
Oh, absolutely.
But one thing I do think that they did have in common, though, and you jump in here, let me know what you think about this, is because of where they lived in the Northwest, and because record labels weren't looking up there. They were super unrefined. That raw edge. Hey, we're a garage band. Really kind of stood out. Really kind of it's very it's anything but professional kind of a thing. I mean, I know that sound became a professional sound. But
well, I think
it was anything but professional.
Well, I think you're close to correct on that. And the fact that Nirvana was one of the most overproduced albums. Like as a matter of fact, it was so overproduced that Kurt Cobain hated it.
Yeah.
And that's why he came out with In Utero afterwards and basically took a shit on production and said, whatever, I'm just going to make this raw ass album. And this is what it's going to sound like. Alice in Chains Facelift was kind of raw, but it was still kind of produced too. I mean, it was, that kind of was dripping with reverb. Bad Motorfinger was very well produced.
Yeah.
Super Unknown was definitely well produced. Not overproduced, but very well produced. And Pearl Jam, I guess I would say 10 might be, it's kind of a raw album. 10 is pretty raw, but
they're most raw.
But the point that I'm making is that I think they had the fuck you attitude of punk, and that's the difference. They definitely benefited from the debauchery and the sex, drugs, and rock and roll that was coming out of the music scene at that time.
Mm-hmm.
With, music was pretty.
Yeah.
Rock was pretty, metal was pretty. And then here came Kurt Cobain, like in your face with just, I don't brush my hair, fuck you, whatever, it doesn't matter. And you have Alice in Chains with Man in a Box, and then you have, even like Soundgarden. Chris Cornell was a pretty man. Like, he was a very handsome man, but still you hear the song Outside and you're like, damn. Like, that dude ain't fucking around. Like, so it was a completely different thing. It was needed. I remember being a teenager when this happened. I was in 10th grade when Nirvana broke. And I remember I hated Nirvana. Out of all these bands, I did not like Nirvana.
You hated Nirvana.
I hated them.
Life.
Well, I hated them because everybody else loved them.
Yeah,
like, I was
that.
one of those guys. I was the anti man. It was like, I was like a double on top. Like, I was a double negative is what I
well,
like I made no sense because I loved hair metal. Mm-hmm. I loved rock. And
I loved hair metal too. I was a huge,
but it was at that point, just so you can understand my musical journey. It was also at that very point that bands like Dream Theater came along, and Rush had just put out Counterparts, which was also an answer. They kind of moved away from their lighter side. I don't know how much you know about Rush, but like Rush Roll the Bones came out in like 1991. And then after that was Counterparts, which was 1993, which was like a heavy edge for them. Like, they completely changed gears. And Rush is my all-time favorite band. So that kind of pushed me in that direction too. But I went and overshot grunge, and then Pantera became one of my favorite bands. So I overshot all of it and said, fuck all this.
Yeah.
And I'm Rage Against the Machine and Pantera now. And so that's where I went. So
in now we're going to jump into this because we're bordering on the edge of what killed metal, not metal, but what killed glam,
glam metal, of glam. Rock metal. I mean, hair metal.
Yeah. And I would say too, in along with all this is Nirvana was probably the most antithetical to the previous generation out of the big four. I think that to some degree you had a lot of connection, like especially with Alice in Chains and especially with Soundgarden, to previous rock sensibility, where Nirvana did have that kind of, we're not doing it this way. We are not just an evolution off of heavy metal. We are an evolution off of punk.
They were an evolution off of something that was dormant for a while. That's what it was. They revived a rotting corpse is what they did. They took something out of the ground.
What rotting Nirvana corpse?
Punk. They took punk out of the ground.
Okay.
Yeah, they pretty much, punk had been buried and put in the ground, and Nirvana dug it up and brought it back. Right. Whereas like Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, and Pearl Jam kind of riffed off of what was existing already.
Yeah.
They did it better. They did it differently. But totally that's what Nirvana did. But if I'm being honest, and like even in my own video, which I entitled the top 5 hair metal albums that were overlooked post 1992, or as I like to call it, Nirvana apocalypse. The reason why I point to Smells Like Teen Spirit specifically is because we all need to remember that Nevermind was out almost a year before Smells Like Teen Spirit took off, before somebody in MTV decided to spin that shit and make it something that it wasn't.
Put it on the buzz bin.
Exactly. And so the reality of the situation is Nirvana wasn't the cause. It was the Archduke Ferdinand. If you know what I'm talking about, reference wise, it was the start of World War I, but it wasn't the reason we fought World War I. World War I was a collection of things that happened. If you want to talk about what actually killed hair metal, what actually killed hair metal was oversaturation, and just in that oversaturation, it became too much of the same, essentially what it was.
Well, and with that, let me steer the direction this way first. Let's talk about the origins of hair metal and glam metal. What are the contributing factors? And I like what you're saying, because it isn't just one thing. Look, my main staple of music is alternative rock. It's not grunge. It isn't. It's alternative rock.
Grunge is alternative rock. Alternative rock.
Grunge is a loud contributor, but there is nothing that, say, Jesus and Mary Chain have in common with Soundgarden. I mean, other than they're both rock bands. Pixies is, Pixies and
Smashing Pumpkins.
And grunge was a huge, or Nine Inch Nails. Nine Inch Nails is industrial, but it was all considered, and you might be interested in this. You might go back and watch my rise of alternative rock, and the reason, you're a music history buff too, so you'd know this. I mean, alternative rock was a catchphrase for bands that really couldn't squarely be put into one category. They weren't just breaking the grounds. They were like, well, I've got 1 foot in new wave, but I've also got 1 foot in blues.
Right, and artists don't like to be pigeonholed either. So
what's your take on the origins of glam metal? Where could we kind of say, oh, this is the beginnings of it, this is kind of where it starts, it creeps its head up, its evolution, that kind of thing?
Well, I mean, it depends who you are. I roughly say from 1982 to 1992. I believe that hair metal proper is like a 10-year run that probably started with like Quiet Riot, and because Quiet Riot Metal Health was a huge album, went to #1 on Billboard, Come On Feel the Noise and all that stuff. Like it was it was a gigantic hit. And even though they weren't nearly as pretty as like hair went on to be, the hair metal scene, like with Poison and Warrant, even the Cherry Pie and how that evolved.
Yeah.
That type of party rock anthem, though, that could cross over to commercial, because like AC/DC had party rock and Kiss had some party rock, and, all those bands had it, but there was something dangerous about that. Whereas for some reason, that particular Quiet Riot song, it didn't, it crossed over nicely, and moms and dads could get down to it and everybody can get down to it. You know what I mean? Even though very slyly the cum was spelled C-U-M.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So, and no one ever said that. Everybody loses their shit over WAP, but nobody ever says anything about 1982. Quiet Riot had a song on the charts that was spelled C-U-M, Come On, Feel the Noise. Like,
right.
I digress.
No, it was a big deal when that came out. I was about 10 years old, and I remember people losing their minds over that. That that you shouldn't say that, and some hidden lyrics in there and stuff like that. That what he was
Right.
actually saying and things like that.
But that's a cover. I mean, it's a cover.
Yeah,
So I mean, it's an old song. I mean, that
Right.
song is like from the '60s. So I mean, come on, man. Like it's just. But yeah, I would say that's your. And then of course, shortly after that, you had Twisted Sister, and We're Not Gonna Take It, and
Right.
that whole thing. And then, but still, I still struggle to consider Twisted Sister a hair metal band because sonically, to me, they're more not metal, but like a rock, like just a hard rock sound.
Yeah, hard rock sound. Yeah.
So I think like, it's hard to pinpoint the exact moment, but like, it's like I said in the mislabeled hair bands, I put Motley Crue as a mislabeled hair band. And the reason I do that is because their fatal mistake was the Theater of Pain album, and specifically the look that they chose to go with on that album and the song Home Sweet Home.
Yeah.
That could very well be the birthplace of it. And at the same time, I think in the same year or within a year, you had Bon Jovi Slippery When Wet came out the same year too.
Right.
So
well, yeah, Smoking in the Boys' Room too was kind of a little bit of a party rock cover that they did. They party rocked it up a little bit. You know what's interesting, Chris? Let me just interject this, and I agree with you. No problem. I agree with you with the fact that these bands were like they weren't squarely in. They had like their moment of hair metal. But it was an evolution. I mean, what they did on Too Fast for Love is not the same as what they did on Shout at the Devil. And then you have this complete switch of look in Theater of Pain. But you had bands doing that, and then you had this little bit of a next generation, and things are moving quickly. We're talking 10 years. But you had the next generation that came out after that, where you had bands that skirted it, like I would say Doc and Rat and Motley Crue, but they gave birth to bands. People like Poison were going, "Hey, we like that part of the band, and we're going to do that to the extreme."
And they tried. I mean, they tried. Don't mistake. Like Rat tried. If Rat weren't so good musically, because let's face it, like musically, Rat is superior to all the hair metal bands, with the exception of maybe Dokken. Like Dokken was a superior band.
Loved Dokken, loved Rat, loved Motley Crue. They were like my three favorites.
I mean, Motley Crue is a questionable music band as far as I'm concerned. I mean, Nikki Sixx is a great songwriter. Tommy Lee's a very good drummer. Mick Mars is a decent guitarist. I mean, he's serviceable. Vince Neil's the worst singer in the history of rock music. I'm just gonna say that guy's awful. Like he's just awful. But I will say at the same time, fast forwarding, John Corabi buries Vince Neil when it comes to Motley Crue singers of all time, but he's not a Motley Crue singer.
No,
you know what I mean?
So it wasn't Motley Crue, really.
He just didn't fit. That album's the best album, with the exception of Theater of Pain, in my opinion, in the Motley catalog, is that self-titled John Corabi album.
Yeah.
But they shouldn't have called it Motley Crue. They should have called it something else. Like honestly,
3 out of 4, but his voice so defined it that, it really wasn't. It's not like Motley Crue was not like, say you have a Dokken where you had a screaming guitarist and a unique voice. You had but
that whole band is tremendous. I mean, Jeff Pilson is one of the most, like, one of the premier bassists in the game at that time, and his backing vocals are just top notch. And then you had Mick Brown, who was just underrated as a drummer. That guy was tremendous. Yeah, I'm starting to relearn how to play drums now. I've played in over 25 years, and I was like, I'll play Dokken. That sounds pretty easy. It's just not easy.
Not so easy. Yeah,
not easy.
You had these group of bands that kind of came out of Southern California, kind of had a party vibe to it, and then you had a party feel to it, and they all experimented at least with the hairspray and the look and a little bit of the sound. I mean, Dokken to me is almost there are elements of Dokken that seems to be almost like a power pop band.
Oh yeah,
with really screaming lead guitar.
Dawkins' bluesy voice. I mean, they're a tremendous band, and like that's why I would never even consider them. I've on that in the comment section of that mislabeled hairband video. I'm getting a lot of Dokken. Oh, how come Dokken's not on here? I'm like, because I don't remember them being labeled as part of the hairband. You got to remember
they definitely had the look for a little while though.
But I mean, you got to remember, like there was a concert tour that was called the Monsters of Rock in 1986, and that lineup was Kingdom Come, which I have no idea why they were there. I hated Kingdom Come, and I never understood that. But Dokken, Scorpions, who are not a hairband, regardless of what anybody says, Metallica, and Van Halen. Yeah. I mean, like there was no hair to be found there, with the exception of Kingdom Come, who was Greta Van Fleet of the 80s, the wannabe Led Zeppelin band of the 80s.
Yeah, okay.
You know, they come along every once in a while. Kingdom Come, House of Lords, Greta Van Fleet. It happens. Yeah. It happens every so often.
So if I were to ask you to, I mean, this might sound like a stupid question, but here it comes. Prepare yourself.
Stupid questions. They're some of my favorite things. I have 1,000 kids, so yeah, I hear stupid questions all day.
All right. Well, so name for me some bands that you would put in and say, these are hair metal bands. These are glam bands.
Poison, Trickster, Firehouse. I mean, we're going first level. Bon Jovi, but in the early days, like 800 degrees Fahrenheit, Slippery When Wet, maybe at the beginning of New Jersey, but I think by the end of the New Jersey tour, they started to wrap that shit up. And then when Keep the Faith came out, they were like, yeah, they shifted gears. They're like, we're a rock band now. That's what we're going to do. And they ditched all that for just being a regular rock band. Faster Pussycats, a hair metal. Warrant. Yeah. See, Warrant in the early days. Yeah. Warrant definitely was. Absolutely. They were full in it. I mean, I think again, I think Janie Lane is one of the most underrated, unrecognized songwriters in the history of rock music. I think that guy can write songs better than just about anybody in the game. But who else would be on the hair list? I'm trying to remember. I mean, there's a million of them. I think I think Stryper had everything there was to be a hair band, but I also think that they had elements of the very beginning of power metal. So like Stryper's is one of the most interesting bands in the history. See, this is what I mean. Like the hair band thing is just, you can debate any of these bands, except with the exception of Poison or, like
I think Poison is the foundational. If we can stick, okay, here it is. Now we're not talking influence. We are talking full blown a hair metal band. I think Poison would be in that category.
Yeah, I think Cinderella's a hair metal band. I think even though they had a bluesy sound and whatever,
they had a very bluesy sound by the time.
But I think they're go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was saying by the time Long Cold Winter came out, their sound changed. They had a very bluesy sound, but that first album, was it their first album with no
Night Songs? Night Songs.
Yeah, that was certainly, they were trying to ride that hair metal thing. He had a different voice though. He didn't have that kind of high pitchy voice. He had a very almost sounded more like Bon Scott than trying to imitate Vince Neil.
Well, and that's the thing. And the one thing that I will find, and what basically, see, so like I told you, I turned my back on hair metal for a lot of my years, for about 10 years, from like the early 90s until about like mid 2000s. I kind of was like, fuck that shit, I'm done with it. Yeah. And then when I kind of got past it and I grew up a little bit, I started listening to music more and really getting into the ins and outs, because I've been a musician since I'm like 11, 12 years old. So I know about music. Yeah. But like, you realize how good these bands were. Like Winger was a full-throated hair metal band. Yeah. Winger. And Creepy too. 17 is a rapey song. I mean, holy hell.
I wouldn't get away with that today.
Oh man, that's a Me Too song if I've ever heard one. Holy shit. But if you really take into consideration that Kip Winger is now a Grammy Award winning, classical composer. Rev Beach has played with every notable, you know, like musician on the planet. And Rod Morgenstein is a drum legend. He played with Dixie Dregs for God's sakes. I mean, you know, Rod Morgenstein's a beast behind the drum kit. And yet when I interviewed Rod Morgenstein and I asked him, I'm like, how do you feel about like the most famous thing you ever did was 17? He goes, paid the bills, man. He's like, it still pays the bills to this day. Yeah. He's like, that song alone, like, paid for every endeavor he ever wanted to do going forward. Yeah. So I understand. So that's why I stopped begrudging these artists who did what they had to. Now, I think what's unfair about it, and we'll get to the crux of the issue here, now that we're coming out of the origins, what killed this genre was oversaturation and too many bands buying into the Aquanet idea that we had to do this, and people were tired of seeing the same thing over and over again. And that's what it was. I mean, there was so
overproduced. It certainly overproduced.
And it became
I lived through it.
It became contrived
too.
Well, I lived through it differently. I was in an odd spot. So I was born at the very end of Generation X. So I'm barely a Gen Xer. I was born in 76. So I'm barely a Gen Xer. I'm like, I'm a Gen X, but like I was like, you know, I was holding daddy's hand throughout the whole thing. Like I had a brother who's full Gen X, okay? And he's 9 years older than me, and he brought me along. So that's how I got my influence. So that's why when I was 13 years old and, you know, this all hit and Pantera came along and, you know, Megadeth changed their sound and Anthrax came along and all that stuff. And I was like, I don't know what I've been missing, but this stuff speaks to me more than that does, you know, than the party stuff, because I don't know. I was 13 years old. I wasn't drinking, partying, fucking girls yet. I wasn't doing that. Right. So that wasn't my thing. So like, I wasn't doing any of that, and it was all good. I'll be honest with you when I tell you, like, I'm a damn fine vocalist. Okay. I'm a singer by trade. That's what I did for many years. And I'm very proud of how good of a singer that I am. And the reason that is because Paul Stanley, Jeff Tate, John Bon Jovi, and those guys were like my musical heroes. You know what I mean? And Tommy Shaw from Styx, like, who's not a hair guy, but like, those are the guys, but he even dabbled in hair metal with Damn Yankees and stuff. Right. So like, so it's because of those guys that I learned how to sing. And then I got into the heavier stuff and I learned how to growl and scream and all that shit too.
So the heavier stuff, the Megadeth and things like that kind of spoke to you more as an individual than the hair bands did.
Well, definitely lyrically. Yes, for sure. Like, well, without a doubt. And then,
that's very similar to my story too. Although I went to alternative rock.
I liked alternative rock too. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I loved, I did, like I said, I didn't love Nirvana, but that was more of a just, I was going against the grain.
Right.
You know, I was one of like maybe 5 to 10 kids in my school that knew Pantera and loved them from the beginning. But like everybody was like, Nirvana smells like Teen Spirit. It was like the thing to do. And I was like, ugh. So I'm like, I'll just listen. So then when Alice in Chains Dirt came out, and, you know, a fair amount of people were into it and it was on MTV, but not nearly as much as people were into Nirvana. I was like, well, Alice in Chains speaks to me more. Yeah. So I listened to that more. It wasn't until later on, like, I would say, if I'm being honest with you, you know, I became a big Nirvana fan post Foo Fighters. Like, I'm more of a Dave Grohl fan than I am a Nirvana fan.
I know there are a lot of people who are like that. There are a lot of people who are more into Foo Fighters. I wasn't. I mean, Nirvana really was the generation, or really was the spokesperson of the generation that spoke to me the most as far as an individual and what was going through. And let me just break in here and share something with you.
Sure.
When you talk about, you know, you were 13, well, I'm only 3 years older than you. I was a phony. I wanted to be everything that these hair metals were talking about. I wanted to be the guy, the McCheesemo, the ruler of 9 planets and all the girls. And I was a complete phony. I had long dyed blonde hair. I mean, but you know, it was a facade for me. And I liked hair metal at the time because it was the facade I wanted. Who didn't want to be cool? Of
Oh,
course I
yeah.
wanted to be cool.
Absolutely.
But I was a complete phony. And I lived through the development. You started getting bands that were coming on, even on a Headbangers Ball, like The Cult and Jane's Addiction. And
Sure.
so I started bleeding more toward those bands. I started gravitating more toward them because of their music and because of their lyrical content. And for me, Nirvana was the band that broke it over. I mean, it was like night and day. And I did the 180. I did the long blonde hair to the, trying to wear the leather pants, the stonewashed jeans, and then to the poncho, and then turn around and the poncho and the messy hair, and tried to pretend for a long time that, I was grunge before it was grunge.
Yeah.
But it spoke to me more as a person. I mean, it really, kind of what I was going through as an individual, lyrically, it spoke to me more. And that's kind of why I glommed onto it more. But I did see that it just started to die out. I for a while there, I did have one foot in kind of this new world that was beginning to emerge, but I was also still listening to my three favorite bands, and they're not glam bands. I agree with you. They had their stint in glam and they gave birth to glam, but my five favorite bands at the time, here were my five favorite bands: Motley Crue, Rat, and Dokken, Judas Priest, and Iron Maiden. Those were my five favorite bands at the time. But unfortunately, and this is the unfortunate part, and I know you're going to understand this, is in the death of glam metal, there were a lot of other bands that weren't glam that got shoved under that carpet.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the thing. Like my number one,
we're not listening to anything there's this magazine. It's called Metal Edge, and if you appeared in that magazine ever,
you're fucked. Or Hit Parader or Circus. Yeah,
you're done, man. You are done.
You might as well just forget. You might as well change your name legally and the whole thing. Move to another country. Hopefully, Sweden makes it for you. Bye bye now. Like that's how it goes. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And that's why the list that I made, the overlooked albums, the hair metal albums. There's a band in there called Lillian Axe, which is one of my favorite bands like ever. And the album Psycho Schizophrenia, which came out in 1993, I wish that was their first album. Because I remember I liked Lillian Axe from the first album, which came out in 1988. And they were on the very small then coattails of hair metal. It was nearing the end. That's when the Tricksters came and and the South Gangs.
Danger.
Yes.
And do you remember Junkyard? And
Jackal and these fucking abortions I came across. It was the worst. It was just and some of these bands were really decent. Like Trickster had some decent songs. I'm not gonna pretend that I didn't get down, to some of these songs. Always a Victim's a fucking banger on the first album. I'm not gonna pretend it wasn't, but at the end of the day, they were all Bon Jovi wannabes. Trickster was a Bon Jovi wannabe from Jersey, the whole thing, right?
Right.
But that's why I say the Lillian Axe album, Psycho Schizophrenia, was every bit as grunge and alternative rock and good as any of that stuff that came out. It's one of the best albums of the 90s, in my opinion, and yet criminally underrated. So underrated that I don't think I don't think that half the people that watch that video go, "Who the fuck are these guys?" Lillian Axe. Right? Are you kidding? And then there were other bands that were gigantic, like Extreme. Like, are you kidding me? Like, Extreme got so screwed. I will never forget the Porno Graffiti thing. How many people I knew personally that bought the album Porno Graffiti in the summer of 1990 when More Than Words was the biggest song on the face of God's green earth. And they bought this album and everybody was like, "This band fucking sucks." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And I remember seeing them open for David Lee Roth, and people were fucking irate. They were beyond themselves because they were like, "Play More Than Words," and they weren't going to because they only had a 30-minute slide.
Yeah,
they were going to skip it and just play their hard shit. But I don't know. They didn't play it. People were pissed.
Yeah.
People were pissed, and I'm like, "There's so much more than that."
There were those slew of bands that kind of came out that unfortunately got attached to glam metal, and they really just were not glam metal. And like you said, you did a video on that, and I did a video on some bands that I thought were underrated bands. I did the top 5 underrated bands that were metal edition. I'm going to do an alternative edition, and I'm going to throw out some bands for you. We're going to see how well you know your shit, dude. And
Okay,
that's the first time I've ever. No, okay.
I just need to pause for 1 second.
Okay.
Just because I don't know if you edit or whatever or what you do,
Okay.
but I have roughly 10 more minutes. So I just need to let you know, just because I have to pick up my children. So
okay, all right, no problem. And
All
then
right.
I'm going to do a little bit of a closing segment, just so
Yep,
you
yep.
know. DAD, remember them?
DAD?
Yes,
Hair metal
Disneyland.
band?
No, they weren't. They were a metal band, but they were
no,
underrated.
I'm not.
Oh, you got to
I
listen.
am not familiar with them. No,
Oh,
I'm not familiar.
I really like them. I've been pushing them for a while. They were one of those bands that I was like, why did they not get more airplay? It was called.
Well, this is interesting. Where do you live? Like, where are you from?
I live in Utah. I'm
and you
from
grew
California.
up in Utah?
Yeah, pretty
Okay.
much. Yes.
So that's interesting. So it's interesting that comes up because there's like a massive regional thing too.
Yeah.
Like because I lived in California for 10 years. And when I moved there, I was shocked when I heard Y&T was playing in San Jose.
Oh, yeah, Y&T.
I'm like, I'm going to go to Y&T. And a friend of mine goes, dude, you better get those tickets early. I'm like, it's fucking Y&T. I'll just walk up to the door. And
it's not.
And the reason why I felt that way is because in New York, where I grew up, 15 people showed up to see Y&T.
Right.
That's what happens. Montrose in California. That was ridiculous. In San Jose, that was ridiculous. It's the same thing in New York. Band called Zebra. They'll sell out anywhere on Long Island, anywhere. But like they couldn't make it out of Long Island, like nowhere else. So So anyway, continue. So this might be interesting. So continue.
Bang Tango.
Oh yes, Bang Tango. They're a hair band, and I thought they were okay. They're not one of. They're not. I remember the album. What was it? Tora.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So and they're okay. They weren't terrible. I didn't like their singer all that much. That was my thing.
Yeah.
They had a good guitarist, I remember, but I didn't love their singer.
Yeah, I thought they pushed the edges of metal a little bit. They kind of had more of a, I don't know. Well, I'll skip that for now. Here's a hair band. Now this is in my opinion a hair band. You might not agree with me or not agree with me, but this is a hair band in my opinion. Now, I'm sorry if people like this band. I bought their album.
Nelson.
I hate it. No, they deserve to die. They deserved to die. Bullet Boys.
Oh, I love Bullet Boys.
You gotta be. Oh, I'm sorry.
Dude, the album, dude, fucking their second album, Freak Show, is one of the most underrated albums I've ever heard, man. Freak Show is Van Halen progression. That's what it is. It was the next step in their evolution. First off, Mark Torrey, the singer, that dude, he's got a great voice, and he blew his voice out between the first and second album. So when he came back for the second album, it was killer. They do an awesome cover of the song "Hang On, St. Christopher" on Freak Show. I thought the first album was okay. I couldn't
stand the first album personally.
Well, I can't put a lot of credence in a song called "Smooth Up In Ya." I mean, I have a hard time with that. And for the love of money, don't cover the OJs. Really, like, just leave that alone. But but the second album, give it a shot, dude. Freak Show is a great album, and it appeared in my honorable mentions on my what is it? The albums list.
Albums that were overlooked.
Yeah.
All right. So before we go, I want you to tell my audience how to get a hold of you. But I do this little thing called Video Store Memories. Okay. So if you can think of because you grew up Generation X or right on the cusp of it, but still I'm sure that part of your Friday night was going to the video store and picking up. Is there anything that you can think of that kind of sticks out to you as far as a video store memory is concerned, either for good or for bad?
Oh, well, it's gotta be the 11-year-old in me who always ventured back into the section where the videos had the black thing over there.
How did I know you were going to say that? Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
Go, Mom, Mom, what's behind this black? Don't look at that. No, I just want to see what's behind. Whoa, what is that, Mom?
What the beat?
And then a whole week's worth of discussion after that.
Right.
Other than that, yeah, I mean, we used to rent movies all the time, but like, yeah, that was the biggest thing. But that was always the most interesting thing. And I always thought it was cool, like whenever I would see like a band put out a videotape. I remember I rented the Kiss Animalize concert because I remember they aired it on MTV, but they only aired like an hour of it. And it's like a 2-hour concert. So then I remember like, oh, I got to see this whole thing. So me and my brother, when we were little, I was like, that was 1984, 85 or something. So I was like 8 years old.
Right.
Like, oh, we need to watch this. We need to watch it. He was 16. So like, yeah, we need to watch it. So we would bother our moms, come on. So yeah.
Well, tell people how to get a hold of you. Tell people how to get a hold of you, because I want to talk to you for just a second off the air before you have to jet.
Sure. The channel is Redbeard Videos. Redbeard Videos, as in the beard that is red on my face videos. Redbeard Videos. And that's that's on YouTube. And then on Twitter, it's @videosbeard. And I'm Redbeard Videos on Facebook. So that's pretty much it.
All right. Thanks for joining
me. And we try to post new videos every week. I or someone else, but it's been just me so far.
It's an excellent selection. It's an excellent selection.
Yeah, we've got about 30 or 35 videos up there now, and there's episodes of the 5s. Most videos are between 20 and 30 minutes. Some of them are on the shorter side, but most of them are, prepare to settle in and watch something for you. But I promise you won't be bored. So that's unless you hate the topic, that's the only reason why you'd be bored. If you have no interest in what you're seeing. But I'm pretty, and I'm hilarious. So it's
I will definitely put a link to your video channel in the description below. Thank you, Chris, for joining
Thank you, sir.
today's program. If you are listening to me on podcast, please give me a star review as well as a regular review. It means a lot to us here on the channel. It helps us with our algorithm and helps all the podcast platforms promote us. But if you like what we're doing on the channel, you're going to like what we're doing on the video channel too. I do have a YouTube page where I do kind of shorter videos that just don't transform over to this longer format. So go over there, check it out. If you like what we're doing here, you're going to love what we're doing over there. But either way, I don't care if you're just listening or watching it on YouTube. I'm just glad you're here. If you're on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the bell notification. If you want to depart with some of your hard-earned cash, please hit the link below to the Buy Me a Coffee page where you can donate some of your hard-earned money and watch my mogul empire grow and all my craziest and wildest dreams come true. So
check this out. If you tell me on my page, if you watch one of my videos and subscribe to my channel and you tell me you came from Ian's channel, then I will make sure that I donate $1 to buy him coffee every time that happens. So if you really like what Ian's doing, I will support that as well. So
all right. Well, thank you very much, Chris. And we're going to end the show, but stay with me. I want to talk to you for just a second afterwards.